Hello and welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to be painting a raven portrait, a beautiful large bird, in a spooky sort of an atmosphere, standing on a gravestone. And this is going to be done in acrylics on a 12 by 12 inch canvas panel, and will be done in an impressionist style, but also little bits of detail here and there. So let's get painting. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is give the entire canvas a coat of gloss or matte medium. In this case I'm using gloss because that's what I have. And now I'm going to give the entire canvas, while it's wet, a very thin coat of Payne's Grey. This is the Imprimatura. It's like staining the canvas of a certain colour. And I'm going to use Payne's Grey for this because I'm going to do the entire underpainting in just Payne's Grey and white. Now I'm using a large brush for this. It's a 1-inch flat bristle brush. I'm going to build up the entire painting now with layers of Payne's Grey to start with, just to put in the darkest areas first. And you can see I can do a certain amount of detail with this brush, but obviously I will have to go down to smaller brushes eventually to do some of the other areas. I'm going to have some areas that are going to be quite detailed really, so they need to have a small brush used. So I've gone down to a 1/4 inch flat bristle brush here, just to put in a few more of these areas that I need to be a bit more defined, like the shape of the legs here and the feet and the claws there. And it's going to be standing, this raven, on an old gravestone, an old stone of some kind, and it's going to have shadows on it, and it's going to have little marks and scratches and little pits and bumps and all sorts of things on this stone. So just putting in basic shapes over the drawing that I previously had already put down. And so you can see that that grey that I put on initially is like a mid-tone, and I'm just putting in darks and lights now. So the dark lights with the Payne's Grey and then a little bit of white added to it will give me this wonderful grey colour. And I can go lighter and darker with this where I require it, where I need it. Now I want that bird to stand out against the background, so the background here is going to be quite light. And it's going to be quite a blended background, but I'll show you how to do that with acrylic, because some people find it difficult to blend. Well, the trick is to do several layers using the same paints over the top of each subsequent dried layer, and you will get a smoother and smoother feel to it as you do the layers, as you go over those areas. So there we go. I'm just going to add a few more of those colours into there. Already those layers beginning to dry, but while they are, I'm just going to put in a few little highlights on this stone here, using some really quite bright white colour, which will change as I go over the top with different greys. But that background has started to dry, so I can start putting in a little bit more into it. But while that bottom left hand corner is wet, I'm going to scratch my signature as I usually do there. Now I can put the rest of the bird in while I'm waiting for that background to dry, using a lighter grey where the light is going to be hitting that bird on those edges, and then putting in some shapes of wing feathers, basic areas where the light should be catching that bird, and also put in where its feet are going to be. I want the feet to be in this one, in anyway, particularly on the left foot, looking at it, I want that to be quite detailed. But not photographically detailed, just impressionistically detailed. There we go. I'm painting really thick white now into this stone because I want those areas to really stand out as being rugged and stone-like. And then I'm going to put in where the light is hitting the bird now. So it'll be on this edge, but not right up to the very edge of the bird. So you've got a little slightly greyer area right on the top. And that gives the painting a little bit more of a rounder form. It looks like the bird is three-dimensional. Don't paint that light area right up towards the edge. A few little highlights here with the very small brush now. Well, it's reasonably small, because I want to establish where those salient details are going to be. This is where I want the viewer to look, where I want the eye to rest, is on the head and the feet. So that's where all this detail is going to be, and nowhere else. You don't want to confuse the viewer by putting detail everywhere. I mean, that was a style. The pre-Raphaelites used that style and put detail in every little part of the painting. But this is Impressionist style, and you only need to put more effort, well, not more effort, but more detail into those areas where you want the viewer's eye to rest. So I'm going to put a little bit of interest there in those feet. They're not hyper-realistic feet, but they look like they could have detail without there actually being much. And that's the beauty of Impressionist detail. You don't have to do a great deal, just enough to let the viewer's imagination do the rest. So a few little highlights, a little dot of light there through that toe. And then that layer at the background now is dry, so I can now go over it with another layer. And using some similar greys now. And it will get, as you will see, it will get smoother and smoother the more of these layers I do. And I will do several layers. I really want that bird to stand out. I've got to make that bird a lot darker yet, but I need to get the background right first. It has to be correct. And you'll see that I go over certain areas like the legs and bits of the feathers at the tail there. I will go over them accidentally. I'll try and keep out of the way, but you can't help but go over them sometimes. It doesn't matter. I can go back into the painting and re-establish those legs anytime. But right now I need to get this background right. So you can see this is the second layer, and you see how much smoother those blends are becoming. It also helps if you work a little bit faster and you use large brushes. And don't use so much water. Water evaporates quite quickly, whereas the paint will actually last longer if you don't add so much water. It will stay wet much longer. So just putting a few little ragged marks into those backgrounds there, because I will blend now with another fan brush, a dry one. And this isn't a bristle one, this is a nylon, a soft nylon fan brush that I'm just lightly wafting over the paint just to lightly blend it. But you can see how I've gone over the legs again now. That's dragged the paint over there. So I'll now re-establish that with a small bristle fan brush. And I can put these darks in like this, but I can also, with the lightness of the touch, produce a greying effect like that. So it creates a blend that way. But you can still see those details underneath. but they're just not as bright. They're nicely blended now. A few little ragged bits of feather here and there. I need to establish those shadows on the stone. Got a lot more work to do to this stone yet. Remember, I don't want to do this. I could do this detailed, but I don't want to do it detailed and realistically. I want to make it look like it's quite realistic, but by using bold brushstrokes. Just redefining the shapes here and there, using the finger to blend where necessary. It's a great blending tool, the finger. And if it's not blending, just wet it slightly, wet your finger slightly and just rub, and it will move the paint around. So getting really random with some of these marks here. These old bristle fan brushes are great for random brush marks. There's nothing quite like it. I love painting with these brushes. And they can be really cheap ones, it doesn't matter. So now with the little 1/2 inch bristle, I'm just putting these legs back in again and redefining the edges of this bird. There, that's a bit better now. I'm going to also do the same with the beak. Like that. It still needs a bit more dark going into that. I'll do that in a moment. And then some mid-tones here and there. Just where the light is just catching parts of the bird. And then the highlights above those. Again, I'm not going right to the very edge of the bird with these lights, these highlights. I'm creating a slightly darker edge as the bird goes away from us. Some more highlights then, again re-establishing them on the bird's head and the beak and the eye, because they will sink in as they dry. So you may have to re-establish these highlights maybe 4 or 5 times before they're as bright as you want them to be. Now somebody said in a comment, why don't I just leave those areas white? Well, that would be a lot of hard work and planning to do that using this style of painting, because you can't do an imprimatura, a toned canvas, and leave areas of it white. It would take a long time to do. And this is, believe me, this is a much faster way of doing it. So I'm going to put some of those highlights back in again here. And I'm going to put these impressions of feathers. And I'll need to go to a smaller brush to do some of these, because some of them are longer brush strokes like that. Like that. And I will go over those again with some Payne's Grey later on and some colour, and it will tone them down. But this is how you do the basic underpainting. Before I even think about colour, I just want to get this underpainting absolutely perfect and correct. The underpainting should be, really, ideally, a completely finished painting in itself, just in monochrome, before you actually start putting the colour on. And it also has to be slightly more contrasty than the actual painting itself, because when you apply the colour in these washes I'm going to do in a moment, then it will slightly soften those contrasts. So it has to be a little bit more contrasty than you would normally paint it. So just tidying up the legs now, making sure that they're absolutely correct, and then putting a few more highlights in just here and there. And just generally re-establishing some of those details, making them a little bit more defined. And then a little bit of a mid-tone on the beak there just to show the shape. And again, that will change when I put colour on. So a few little more marks into the mid-tone areas of the bird and a few highlights on the toes there. Just impressions, that's all. And now a few little marks on this stone just to make it look like there's cracks and little holes here and there, pits and ridges. So it's not a smooth stone, it's a nice old weathered stone. And a few highlights on those little lines here and there to create and give the illusion of impressionist realism, you might say. It's not pure realism. And then once all this is done, as I say, I will be painting a colour layer over the top in glazes. But this particular layer has to be absolutely and totally dry first, before I do that. So I'm just making sure I've got everything exactly as I want it before I do that, and I'm just going to put these highlights in the sky again because the background just wasn't bright enough to my liking to really show the bird out, you know, make the bird stand out. And this is the beauty of painting in monochrome. You can do this. You can adjust things very, very easily. But once it's completely dry, I will then give the painting a little spray of water and then give it a coat of a mixture of acrylic retarder 60% and flow improver 40%. Now, this will allow the paint to, well, basically take about half an hour to dry. So I can now go over the top with these very fine, thin glazes, just little bits of colour applied here and there. I'm putting some blue in here, and I'll put in quite a lot of blue on the bird, but I'm going to put some warmth in there as well. Now this is the way the old masters would have painted. They would have done a detailed underpainting first in oils, and then they would have applied colour glazes over the top of that dried underpainting. And this is basically what I'm doing, but with acrylics. So using a modern paint with old master techniques. And it works. You still have to paint reasonably quickly with this, but I think you develop that as the more you do acrylic painting, the more speed you will accomplish and attain. So I'm just warming that background up, and I just need some highlight now, a nice warm highlight into that white that I've already got on there. So it's just slightly warm white put in, and that really throws that bird out now. It stands out, which is what I was after, and it's also nicely blended because of the retarder that I've painted on. And I'll put some warmth into this stone as well now, and a little bit into the bird here and there. And also what I can do is with a little bit of the Payne's grey, once I've got this warmth in there, I'll add a bit of Payne's grey into it, and I can soften some of those mid-tones now and go over, and with the lightness of touch as well. So it depends how hard and heavy you use the brush stroke. You can actually make it nicely graded, so you can still see through those colours to those details underneath in the underpainting. That's the whole point of this underpainting method. Is you can have all that detail and then do the colour over the top, but you can still see it through the thin layers of paint. And I'm only using thick layers of paint where I want to go very, very light and bright, like the highlights. So a little bit of blue here on the corner of this stone, just to give it a little bit of interest there, and a bit more elsewhere to harmonise the painting. And those highlights, once again, re-established, making them really stand out now. So just a few little highlight marks to do, and then that's the painting finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this video and hopefully found it rewarding and entertaining. Let me know if you have any comments or questions that I may be able to help you with. And I look forward to you joining me on my next painting video. So until then, have a lovely day and happy painting!